All right. Did just tick over to 3:30 for me, so we'll make a start. Would like to welcome everybody to the final webinar of Education Week 2025. My name is Daniel. I'm a member of the product education team here at BGL. Excuse me. And I'll be running through today's session, which is all about the new Australian compliance screen in CAS 360. I'll be running through how you can use this screen, how you can use it to effectively manage some of the upcoming AML and CFT requirements as per AUSTRAC, and I'll essentially just go through some of the details about the screen, so why it was built and what functions it currently has. Before we do get into the webinar, once again, we do have some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded along with all the other webinars in Education Week, and all attendees will receive a email with a link to the recording. In addition to this, if you do have any questions during today's webinar, please use that Q&A function within Zoom. I do have some colleagues here with me who can answer some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions as well as we go along. You will have to bear with me, so I do apologize. My second monitor is not working, so I'm currently cramped into the one monitor, but I will do my absolute best. So, Education Week is coming to a close. And as we have mentioned, we have covered all of our products here at BGL. Today, naturally, is only going to be focusing on CAS 360, that one on the left. And the full timetable, in case anyone was curious, looks like this. However, if you did want to receive any of the recordings, we'll post a link to our YouTube channel just in the Zoom chat right now. All of the recordings will be uploaded there, and you can also check out some of our old Education Week videos. Some of them may have some outdated information, but a lot of the processes remain the same, so it is a useful resource in case you wanted to do some further research in your own time. But we should expect those recordings to be uploaded sometime after next week, just so our team has some time to edit and produce those videos for you. Let's get into the actual content for today. So the agenda is fairly simple. We're going to be running through the Australian compliance screen, and as you can see, I've listed out all of the sections that are part of that screen. Some of you may be familiar with some of these terms, as AUSTRAC has been releasing different pieces of information relating to them, and essentially what you will be needing to do come future dates in order to meet compliance requirements. So we'll be going through each of these sections and how to complete them. After that, I'll just do some rehashing of some of the key dates and some things you might need to be aware of. I would like to mention that we're unable to we're unable to provide compliance advice here at BGL, and everything in this webinar essentially is for informative purposes only. We'll be specifically focusing on the software itself. However, I would recommend if you had any questions about the legislation or upcoming dates to redirect that to AUSTRAC, as they would have the most appropriate information. So let's get into the content for today, the Australian compliance screen. What is the purpose of this screen? As it says on the slide here, the purpose is to utilize the company's contacts, BGL ID results, and other details that you have already entered into CAS 360 to satisfy the upcoming AUSTRAC requirements. We do have an abbreviation refresher here, so we're going through all those terms that we know and love, like AML for anti-money laundering, CDD for client or customer due diligence, CTF, CFT, KYC, and PEP. I'm sure we've heard these a billion times before. However, if you did need a refresher, they are just here in this slide. So I will be referring to these, however, mainly focusing on the software. We're going to do it a little bit differently today. I would like to actually jump into the software first, show you the process of using this screen, and then we'll get into the details about how different functions you can use. So I'll tab over to CAS 360 right now. Hopefully, before you're using the compliance screen, you'll already have imported a number of your companies, as well as many of their details into your subscription. And we can see some of them here. In order to access the compliance screen, we can navigate to one of our companies. I'm going to use this one here. And the compliance tab is at the top right. So you have general details, all the other tabs, and finally, compliance. In this compliance screen, you'll have a little bit of a note about your AML and CFT requirements, and you'll have this CDD required section. In order to sort of activate or begin using this screen, simply toggle this option on, and you'll be given a checklist on the left side. The purpose of this screen simply is to go through, complete each of the sections, upload any supporting documentation needed, fill out any of the necessary details, and then you can use this to then generate a report. So one example for using this, you might go into the screen and you have a start date here. So that might be today's date. You'll be asked to select a compliance officer. Now, this can be someone outside your company. However, they do need to be added as a contact within CAS 360. So if we click into this and start typing, you can see it's going to search our contact list. However, if you can't find that, you can simply select the option to, if I just minimize these here, to add a new contact. So can't find the contact, click to add new, and that will open up our new contact screen. I'm not going to go through this process because contacts is ingrained into CAS 360, and hopefully you've done this process or are aware of how to add new contacts. The one thing to note about adding contacts on this for this section, they do need to be an individual, so they can't be any other type of contact. Only individuals will be recognized here. So I'm going to select our compliance officer, and we can select this option here to upload some supporting documents. I actually have a file open, so I can actually grab this, grab a supporting document, and upload it here. Once again, with all of our documents in CAS 360, once they're uploaded, you can choose to delete them, you can download them, or you can preview them as an attachment file as well. Let's move on to the next section by clicking next here, and we'll go to our nature of business relationships. You'll be given options here that you can particularly select, and all you need to do is select the relevant one to the company you're processing. And once again, you can upload supporting documents. You're also given the option to add additional relationships if that's appropriate to your circumstance. Just delete this. Go. In the third section is all about your source of funds and source of wealth. Currently, the way it stands is that you can enable these options, you can input some details into the text fields, and you can also upload additional documents as well. One thing I'd like to note is that you can actually upload image files. So PNG, JPEG files, these sorts of files can be uploaded. Naturally, you can't preview them because we're only able to preview our PDF files. However, if your supporting document did come as images, that is an option available for you. So source of funds, source of wealth. We do have a question here, the nature of business relationships in CAS 360. Where does this list come from? I'll cover that in just a little bit, so please bear with me, but I do have all that information for you. Individual section. So the individual section is where we start seeing the power of CAS 360 and having this screen here. It's currently recognized 2 of our individuals here. And typically when you enter this screen for the first time, none of them will be toggled on. Andre Jones up the top here has a 100% shareholding, and this actually refers back to, if I open this on a new tab, I can't open that in a new tab. I might show it just a little bit later. But it relates to all the shareholders you've had added into this company. John Jones here is actually added as a director on the officer's screen. On the individual section, all you need to do is enable that an individual meets this CDD required. And then you can fill out some of the details, such as if a PEP check is required, source of funds is required, and once again, we have these text boxes and the sections to upload documents. Down the bottom here, you also have identification sections. So you can choose from a total of 5 supported identifications that we do have. But things to note is when you're selecting a bank statement or a utility statement, you will be required to upload supporting documents. When it comes to the first 3, you aren't required to upload supporting documents. However, you will need to fill out the details related to that identification. One thing to actually be aware of is BGL ID actually works and integrates with this screen. So we do have our request ID verification and verify identity buttons here. Clicking these will simply open our BGL ID workflow, and we can go through these processes. Julia actually covered this in a webinar a little bit earlier today, so I won't cover this process. But generally, if you wanted to validate the ID of your contacts, if you wanted to essentially confirm that your clients are who they say they are, you can go through this process to either request additional identification that might be missing, or maybe you can verify some identification that you already have. So these are the options you have that connect with BGL ID. A quick note about that, BGL ID is an additional cost. It's not an added part of your subscription. You simply pay as you use it and go forth. And we do have our regular government ID check, an advanced one, which adds in advanced used databases. And finally, the biometric scanning, which provides another level of validation for your clients, determining that they are the same person on their identification. We'll move on to the next section now, because we will come back to the individual section later. In our risk assessment section, we do have a couple of options to fill out. The first question is the risk factors group, and these are split into 4 sections. Once again, I'll cover where they come from just a little bit later, but we have customer, designated services, delivery channels, or country. From here, you'll then be able to select a specific risk factor. So for instance, for customer type, is this customer a new client? Is there unusual transaction activity? Just select whichever one is appropriate. Once again, we have that free text field and the option to upload additional documents. What you will need to do in this section is keep adding each of these, nominating the risk factor groups, nominating the specific risk factors. And as you can see, because we've selected designated services here, that has changed the risk factors to the appropriate options. Fill out these details, enter the risk assessment details, and there is a final section down the bottom. You will be asked, having reviewed the above options, what would you rate the overall risk rating for your client? In this case, just select whatever is appropriate. And finally, select the level of CDD required, whether that's initial, ongoing, simplified, or enhanced. So these are options that are available for you, and whichever one you choose does depend on the company you are completing this for. Ultimately, we cannot say what is correct, as well as AUSTRAC is still yet to release some information about this legislation, but do note that we will be updating this screen accordingly to match those legislative requirements. The notes section, self-explanatory. You can add some additional notes, so I'm not going to go through that any further. And finally, we have our risk review section. This is the final section, essentially allowing you to record who this compliance check has been completed by, and then potentially send it out to another one of your colleagues or someone else to review this to confirm it's okay. So you can select the user that has completed this, and this is actually the user list. This is not your contacts. So this is someone who has access to the software and to log in. You have the date of completion. You have the option to send it to a reviewer, as well as the option to enter the next, well, when the next review date is required. Now, what I've actually done before is I've sent this for review. Naturally, one thing to mention is you can't completely wipe and restart this screen, because I've done some testing on this screen. You might have seen that there have been some details already entered. Essentially, you can toggle this on and back off. If I were to go back to the first section, it'll make it all disappear. But if I toggle it on again, it will simply have those details saved. So what I've done previously is I've sent this for review. So you can send this to a reviewer by selecting this option. And as it mentions, it says the next review required must be after the current start date. So I do need to change this particular date to make that work. Select send to review. And then this will open a little text box allowing us to select another user to send for review. And I'm just going to enter my email here. There we go. You do have the option to send notes, but I'll send that off. And hopefully I will receive that in my email. But that's the general process. Some other things to mention is that we do have our compliance report we can download. If we select this option, that will download a report for us here. And this is the output that will come from the compliance screen. It has all the details you have saved, whether you have completed certain checks, the type of identity provided for each individual, details about the company that has saved in CAS 360. And this is the whole reason why we made this screen, essentially is to combine all of your company details that you already have saved with what you complete on the compliance screen and generate this final report. In terms of the review, I've just received this email now. And if you send it out for review, you will receive, the reviewer will receive this email prompting them to log in. If I click this button, it brings us back into the software, essentially allowing us to review the compliance report that we just generated. We'll click Review Documents here, just on the right side. It will open up this compliance report, and then from there we can choose to either reject or approve this particular document, including adding a message if you did need to. I'm just going to select Approve for this one, and it says the compliance review has been accepted. So hopefully now, if we go back to our compliance screen, I'll refresh the page so that it updates the details. Head to our risk review section, and you can see that it has been reviewed by the person you sent it to, has details about the review date when it's been completed, and the details about the next review date. One other thing that has been added as a part of this compliance screen is some alerts. So when it comes to our alerts, these are based on the next review date, or there are some other alerts as well. What I'll need to do is just quickly change this. So this is prior to the current date. I just put it here, 2025. Hopefully that will be able to be saved. Nope, that's going to prevent us from there. So I might just change some details so that we can push this date back. That's unfortunate. Regardless, I'll show you the alerts on the screen. I apologize about this. Just going to discard those changes we've just done. Okay, so the alerts here, as you can see, we have an additional column, our fifth column that has been nestled between director ID and our company debts. This particular one here, this yellow alert, is mentioning that the compliance review is overdue. And this particularly relates to that review date that I entered. Essentially, if the date is past that review date, then this alert will show up, prompting you to say to go into the compliance screen and complete another review to refresh that. If you were curious about how these alerts work, you can always hover over the question mark icon on your company selection screen, and those will show you the details of the different alerts and what they mean. The most common one is the fact that the compliance review is required here, specifically relating to the date, and we are looking to essentially build more functionalities around that to make the compliance reporting easier in the future. So that essentially is the compliance screen. Everything we need to know about it within the software. There are some more functions, and I'll cover that as we go along with them in our presentation. Let's do a quick review though, just to make sure that's ingrained in your head, as well as these slides will be made available for you. So the compliance screen, it does update in real time as you go along. And as you might have seen, if there is missing pieces of information, it'll notify you with that little red notification icon. The first section, CDD required, that compliance officer does need to be added to your global contacts list, as well as in all of these sections, or a large amount of these sections, there's the option to upload supporting documents. The second section, nature of the business relationship, has these particular options. And this is the question that we had earlier from one of our viewers here. So the nature of business relationships is taken generally from AUSTRAC's resources. So in this particular section, this is a part of the reform checker that you can actually complete yourself. And it essentially is a quiz or just a quick click through thing to determine if you might have some reporting requirements for AUSTRAC. So for instance, if I start again, it will ask you to go through if things are regulated. Do you offer any real estate services? Do you offer any precious metals? Do you offer any virtual assets? Do you offer any business services? So this slide is where we got our particular sections from. Naturally, if any updates come to AUSTRAC, we'll look to reflect them within the software. Number 3, our source of funds and source of wealth. Once again, we had the source of funds and source of wealth sections. These are fairly broad as we do have our free text section, but generally we do have a resource here that you can actually display about the source of funds and source of wealth. We do have a question. Can we select more than one of our business relationships? So let me see if we can do that and show that on screen here. Nature of business relationships. Once on this screen, you can always add additional ones, however many as needed. You can also select those here. There is also a free text option if you did need to just simply enter your own one. The fourth section, individuals. BGL ID verification results do automatically populate within the individual section. Specifically, you can review some of these details. I haven't actually included this in my main presentation because that does require some data being added to the backend, but I do have this other test environment that I can demonstrate it on. So we have a client here, which has some identification that has been shown. Mary O test 24. I do apologize for the sample name, but this has our identity verification results received from from BGL ID in CAS 360. You can select Gov ID to have some look at some details here. However, this is manually passed, so it's not going to show us those details. But the one thing to note is that the identification details are received down the bottom. So this is the passport that was added, the passport details that were received through BGL ID, and they now exist on this screen. So it's very useful to have those BGL ID processes in place. That way you're essentially able to bring them across to the compliance screen instantly and speed up your processing. That is what I wanted to show on that screen. Also about the individual section, we do have 5 identification types that are supported as of today's date. Naturally, this can change as we do make updates to the software. If you did have any additions that you would like added as supported identification, please feel free to use that feedback icon as that gets sent directly to our product team. The risk assessment section, as I mentioned, allows you to select the risk factor, risk rating, and level of CDD required. In terms of the risk ratings and the risk factors and whatnot, there are some resources around that, and I have linked it here as well. So this links back to our Assigning Customer Risk Ratings AUSTRAC article. Specifically, the section we're after is starting in section 1 here, talking about the kind of customer, type of designated service, delivery channels, or what countries. So customer, designated services, delivery channels, countries. That refers to, if I go back to our slides, the risk factors group. So we have the customer type, delivery options, so on and so forth. Once again, if we do have more being added in the future based on AUSTRAC communications, we'll look to add those as well. Finally, the risk review section. As I mentioned, this date for the next review required does interact directly with that compliance alert. Essentially, when that date passes, it'll say that a review is required. One other thing that I didn't specifically mention, and I'll quickly show you it in the software as well, is that you can update what displays on the compliance report. you actually need to go to the compliance report settings and update the defaults. Once that's completed, that will be applied when you generate that report. So the settings for that, once again, is in settings, is in reports on the left side, and I'm just going to discard my changes. Going down to our AML reports, compliance report here, and you need to go to report settings in the top left. You'll be given the option to include or not include certain sections. So if I didn't want to show individuals in the report, I can remove that, click save. And now once I go back to the compliance screen, I could generate that report without the individual section included. And finally, just a refresher about the compliance alerts. You can select that question mark icon there, and those compliance alert details are included as well. We did have a question. What are the supporting documents that you mentioned and uploaded a while ago? Those were just an example of suggested documents, and I gave myself just a couple of these to show as an example, so source of funds. These aren't actual documents. What you would need to upload, it does depend on what AUSTRAC is requiring for their upcoming legislation. So we have essentially given you just an option to upload. You would just need to upload whatever supports whatever section. So if you're completing source of funds, upload a document that shows where that source of funds come from. If you're uploading something about a risk assessment, it might be something to do with a risk assessment. But unfortunately, we can't say specifically what document needs to be included in which section. So that's all about the screen. Some of the key dates ahead of you. Firstly, around the end of January 2026, AUSTRAC has mentioned they will release some more specific guidance related to kits. Unfortunately, this has been delayed from December, so it is a tentative end of January, but essentially we should be more aware that something will come out and to keep an eye out to keep informed about those requirements. 31st of March, naturally, is when AUSTRAC enrollments open. If you do enroll before that date, I do believe if you do processes before that date, you will need to redo them on the 31st of March. So essentially, 31st of March is the date where we should start acting. And naturally, 1st of July 2026, these obligations will apply to tranche 2 entities, which involves your accountants, trust and company service providers, typically people who are involved with managing companies or managing accountants as well. And as I did mention, updates will be made to the compliance screen as more of these communications come out. Our team is essentially working hard to try to make this a one-stop solution for all of your AUSTRAC requirements. However, we can only put in updates to the software based on what AUSTRAC has released. So we are trying our best. If you do find some further information that AUSTRAC has released and want that included, once again, we do have that feedback option in the software. So moving towards 1st of July 2026, what should you do? Naturally, these instructions are on AUSTRAC's website, and I thought I'd just put them at the end here as a reminder. You can look to enroll with and register with AUSTRAC. You can look to develop and maintain an AML or CTF program, and this is what the compliance screen is built for. That is available for you now in CAS 360, and we would recommend getting comfortable with it and potentially setting up some of those details now so that when the reporting time comes, you are much more prepared to essentially tackle those for all of your companies. You can also get your staff ready. So I don't know if you'd like to send this video to staff members who might be using the compliance screen, but essentially getting them all familiar with this screen can be beneficial in the future. You can also conduct the customer due diligence, just essentially on your own, to either using BGL ID, which we have available, or through your own methods. You can report certain transactions and suspicious activity, as well as making and keeping records through that compliance screen. So these are taken from the summary of obligations that I have linked here as well.